In the first video in this series, we built a CRUD API to be able to create, read, update and delete users in our database. We're using MongoDB as our data persistence layer, Fastify as our web framework of choice, and .env is the only other library we've got installed which we're using to manage our environment secrets. We have a larger data model here. We have our project, our task, and our comment. And in this video, we're going to add the project and think about the relationship between the project and the user model. So let's dive in. For users, we had three files, our controller, our model, and our roots. And we're going to have a very similar setup for our projects. So let's start with our model. Project.model.js. So as before, I'm going to import Mongoose. And I'm going to create a project schema. So const project schema is going to equal a new mongoose.schema, and we're going to then be able to set up the fields. So if we look back over at our definition, we've got a project ID, which is going to be managed by Mongo. We've got a title, a description, a start date, an end date, an ID, and team members. So let's just think about each of those. So we'll start out with title. Title is going to be of type string. It's going to be required. It doesn't make sense to have a project without a title, and we'll trim it. So we'll remove any white spaces there. Our description is going to be largely the same, still be a string, but it won't be required. We won't require someone to describe the project. Our start date will be of type date, and we will require that. Equally, our end date will be the same. So title, description, start to end date. Now we're on to our project manager. So our project manager is going to be of type mongoose.schema.types.object.id. So this is going to be the ID of our project manager. And it's going to ref a particular model, our user model. So I'm going to import that up the top. So const user equals require user.model. We set required equals to true. And then we want to make sure that our user has a role of project manager or admin. So to enforce that, we're going to create a validator. So we'll validate and we pass in a validator. And this is going to be an asynchronous function because we're going to have to call back out to our database and find out something about that user. So this will receive the object we're trying to validate. So we want to get the user, const user will be await user.find by ID, the value that's being passed in. So the user ID that's being passed in. And then we'll return whether or not admin or project manager is included in the values of user.role. So that will return true if admin or project manager are the role for our requested user. It'll return false otherwise. If it's false, it's going to fail. And so we can pass a message. Our message is a function that will receive some props and we'll say user role must be either admin or project manager. So that's our project manager. Now for our team members are going to be an array of users. So an array of type mongoose.schema.types object ID, and it's going to reference the user model. So now that we have our schema, we've got all of the fields that we wanted, we need to instantiate our model. So we do that with a const project equals mongoose.model. We pass in the name of our model, which is project, and our schema, which is project schema. And that's what we'll export at the bottom. So module.exports project. So we have our model. We now need to hook up our roots with our controllers that are going to use this model. So let's start with our C of CRUD. We'll do our create. So I'll create a root for this, project.roots.js. And it's going to follow the same pattern. So I'll just bring this in here. Instead of users controller though, we're going to use our const project controller. It doesn't exist yet, but we're going to get there in a second. And we're going to start with our create. So I'll bring that one to the top, comment out these others, and fix this. This should be our project controller, create project. We've got our first root set up. Let's register that root, and then we'll write our controller. So we'll register the root. Now how do we do that? We import our root. So const project roots equals require roots project.roots. And then we'll register them. So fastify.register project roots, and we'll prefix these with API version 1 projects. We're versioning our API so that if we change our API, then we can let our users know that there's been a change. And we're pluralizing the resource that we're referencing. So projects, users, tasks, we pluralize everything that's there. So now we're just left with writing the actual controller. Project.controller.js in our controller folder. And in here, we'll require our models. So we have our model for our project, and we also need our user as well. So user equals require our model for our user. So the first function we want to define is our function to create the project. As before, that'll take the request and the reply, and we're going to have our try catch set up there. And at the end, we're going to export this. So module.exports an object that includes our project module. So what do we want to do? Well, first of all, I want to confirm that the project manager ID exists in the database and is valid. So I'm going to do the validation here and throw an error, as well as doing it in my model. So I'm handling it in two places, and just to make sure that it's doing the right thing. If that does exist, then I'm going to verify that the team members exist, throw an error if one of them is missing, and I'll send a response. Then I'll create my project and return that. Okay, so let's work our way through that. So first I'm going to get the project manager. My project manager is going to be await user.findById. I'm going to get that from the request.body.projectManager. I'm going to say, look, if there isn't a project manager, so this comes back as null, or as we did in our validation, admin project manager includes our project manager.role. So if either of those are failing, then we're going to return a reply, set the status to 400, our error code, and we'll send message invalid project manager. Now we're returning early if that fails. We'll do the same for our team members. So I'm going to loop over the team members. So for let member ID of request.body.team members, and we will say for each, we want to get the team member, find by ID, the member ID. And if they don't exist, then we'll return reply.status 400, and we'll say with the message invalid team member, and we'll send the ID. So by the time we get to creating the project, we know we have a valid project manager and a valid set of team members. So we feel confident to go ahead and create the project. So const project is going to be new project using request.body, and then we'll return that project. If there's an error that we haven't handled, database failure, some other problem that we haven't managed, we'll send another error status of 400, and we'll send that error back to our client. So let's go about testing this. I'll pull up my testing tool, Postman. So I'll start my server, and previously we've done node source app.js. That works and that's fine, but it requires you to be able to remember which file it is, and it's easy to make a problem. So we'll go to package.json and we'll add a start script. And we'll just put the command in here, source app.js. And now when we get back to our command line, we'll do npm run start. That will look inside of our package.json. It will look in the script block for something called start, and then we'll run that command. So functionally, it doesn't change what we're doing, but it just makes it easier to remember. So let's go and get all of our users. We have one user who's a team member. We've got me, who doesn't have a role. That's not great. And we have this other member, John, who is a team member. So we would like to create a new user, and this new user might be our manager at manager.com. This is going to be our team leader, team manager. And so they'll need a role, and their role is going to be project manager. Then I need to restart my server, so I can stop this and restart it. And now that'll work. Now that remembering to restart our server when we're building an API can be really frustrating. And previously, we've had to use a tool called NodeMon or Node Monitor to be able to restart our server when we change our files. But Node now has that built in. So in my package.json, I'm going to add another script, and this is going to be dev. I'm going to add node --watch source app.js, and then I'll run npm run dev. Now what this will do is it will, anytime I save one of the files that I'm working on, so maybe I put a full stop on here, it will restart the server. So I don't have to wonder, oh, why is that not working? I'm sure I fixed it in code and it's there. Okay, so now I have a manager, which is going to be helpful. So what I want to do now is create a new project. So I'm going to post API to projects. We're going to set the body type to raw and to JSON. So if we just post this, we should get an error message telling us what we're missing. Invalid project manager. Great. So let's fix that. So project manager. Well, first of all, let's get a project manager who doesn't have that role just to make sure that our validation is working. So I'll send this one. Invalid project manager. Great. And my hope is that this one will work instead. Great. That's worked. But I'm getting a new error. This time for team members. It says team members is not iterable because it's expecting team members to be an array. So if I send an empty array, that's going to be fine. It's gone ahead and made the project. So in this team members, I'm going to add a team member. I'll add John and I will add Testy McTesterson. Okay, so I also want a title for my project. So building Fastify API. I can have a description. Using Fastify to build API for task management system. And I can have a start date, already started really. And I'll pass it in as a string. So I'll say 2023, 5, and then the 20th. And the end date, let's put it as the 1st of September. And great. They've been converted into timestamps, got our description there, and we've created this project. We now need to add in our read and our up. So for read, we want to be able to get all projects. So project controller, get all projects. And we need to go back into our controllers to be able to get that. So we'll create an async function, get all projects, which again are going to receive the request and the reply. And we're going to export it at the bottom. So get all projects. So it's going to be another try catch. And if there's an error, we will reply with a status of 400 and we'll send the error. In future, we might want to do that error handling differently. We might want to incorporate a logging service or some other way to be able to manage our errors rather than just sending it back to the client all the time. So what do we want to do here? We want to get all the projects. So const projects equals await project dot find. Then we'll do reply dot send the projects. Okay, so I'll do get on that route. I'll send, I'm getting an empty array of projects. So we want to await project.save. So we created the project in memory, but we then didn't commit that to the database. So if we go back to create our new project over here, I send this now, it works just the same way. But now if I get my projects, I'll get my project back again. Now you'll see that I get back the IDs for my project here, which can be fine. I can carry out another request to be able to get those user models. But MongoDB allows me to use a function called populate. So once I've found this project, I want to populate the project manager. And the fields I want to populate are first name, last name, and email. Let's carry out that request again. And we see now the project manager, we get our ID with the first name, the last name, and the email. So we don't need to carry out a second request. We've populated that data. Let's do the same for the team members. So we just chain it. So we just do another .populate. This time we want to populate the team members. And for them, I'd like their first name, last name, email, and their role. Get a request again. And now we get our team members populated out like that. So we've got our create, we've got our read. Now we want to read a single record, update a single record, and delete a single record. So let's have a look at those. So root, get project. So this is project controller dot get project by ID. So in our controllers, async function, get project by ID. Again, it's going to take the request and the reply. Again, it's going to have a try catch. Again, the catch is going to have a reply .status 400 and send the error. And lastly, we want to export our project ID. So the logic is going to be very similar to our get user by ID over here. We'll get the user and then we'll send. But we'll do that for a project. So we'll do const project equals await project.find by ID. And we get that from request.params.id. And why is it .id? It's because in our root, we have got :id. If we change those two letters to be identifier, number, code, object, whatever is here followed by the colon is what we're going to extract here. Then we will reply.send our project. See what happens. So go and get one of those project IDs here, project/here. Okay, so we get a project, looks good. Again, it's not populated, so we can go and fix that. If we send one that's not there, it comes back as null. Actually, we probably want to have better error handling than that. So let's quickly fix that. We want to say if no project reply.status, that'd be a 404, not found. Send message project with that ID, not found. Okay, it's probably a slightly better error message. Okay. So we have got our create and read. We now need our update method. So we will do this with fastify.put, project controller, update project. And again, this pattern's going to continue. We'll have an asynchronous function because we want to carry out an asynchronous operation because we want to talk to our database, calling it update project. It will receive the request and the reply. It'll have a try catch. In the catch, we're going to do reply.status 400 and send the error. We'll export it at the bottom. And in here, we're going to update the project. Well, how are we going to update the project? We want to do that same validation that we've done before. Okay, so we're going to get the project ID, request.params.id. So extract these at the top and the updates. Updates equals request.body. So I want to check if the project manager is valid. I want to do all of this validation again. And this is making me think I want to have some kind of middleware that's going to handle this later on. So where am I getting the project manager from? Well, this is actually from updates, project manager, and that should be fine. Where am I getting the team members from? That's from updates, team members, and I'll be fine. So we have the same validation for our update as we had for our create. And then we want to update our project. So const updated project is going to be await project.find by ID and update. And the project ID we've extracted above from the request. We also then have the updates that we want to send. So our updates. And finally, we want to set our new equals true. We'll finish off by reply.sending our updated project. So let's test that. In our body, let's change the start date to be the 21st. That's the only thing we want to change, okay? Now there's going to be a problem here. If I send this, it's going to say that I don't have a valid project manager because I only actually want to validate the project manager if the project manager exists. I'm going to say if updates.projectmanager, then do that validation. Because we won't always send an update for all the fields, okay? Now we've got the same problem with our members. So we want to wrap that. If updates.teammembers, then do that validation. It's possible the project doesn't exist, so we should handle that. And if it doesn't exist, this will come back as null. So if not updated project, we will return with a reply.status 404, and we'll send a message saying no project with that ID found. We're almost there. We've done our create, read, update, and now we just have our delete. So this is going to be our project controller, delete project. So let's go to our controller. We'll be used to this pattern now. It's an async function, delete project, get the request and the reply, have a try catch. Catch will reply.status 400.send our error, and we'll export that to bottom, delete project. So here we want to delete the project. So we'll do const deleted project equals await project.find by ID and delete. And we want to send request.params.id. If not deleted project, we will return reply.status 404 and we'll send a message which says no project with that ID found. Otherwise, instead of sending back the deleted project, we'll send a status of 204 and we'll send an empty string. So 204 is the status code that says no content found. So if I try to delete now, it's going to say that that project doesn't exist. So let's create a new project, get its ID, and then let's delete that project. Okay, 204, no content, and that's fine. If I try to delete it a second time, no project with that ID found. So now our API has got full CRUD functionality for these two models, our user model and our project model, which is related to our user model through our project manager and through our team members. We still have lots to do. I'm not going to create new videos for the task and the comment. I'll leave those to you, and I'll create a separate branch in our repository so that you can have a go at doing those. But the next video will start from those having been completed. And we'll look at adding authentication and authorization. We need to look at testing, not manually using Postman, but automated testing and what that looks like. And we'll think about other features that are going to make our API as fully functional and as real life as possible. Hopefully see you in the next video. Thanks for staying tuned so far.